Judge appeal. Part 1. Read the judge. When in debate, the judge is the most important person in the room. They make the decision of who wins the debate. If the decided speaker wins, they most likely have some affiliation with debate. And if they're a lay judge, they probably don't want to be there because they feel like they're wasting their time. First, when you have a judge, you should ask around about who they are. You should figure out what school the person comes from, what occupation they have, their age, and their debate experience. One way you can find out their debate experience is you can ask them if this is their first time judging or if they've debated before to find out some sort of idea. Another way to ask is to ask older debaters, coaches, and friends at other schools, or even friends at your own school that have had this judge in previous rounds at that tournament or at tournaments before. Part 2. The types of judges. The first type of judge is a flow judge. They vote off the flow, which is the notes that they take during the debate. They prioritize technical choices over perceptual dominance, which means that if you seem like you're winning the debate and you're speaking very well, that won't be the main deciding factor that chooses whether or not you win a debate, which is the third bullet point, technicality over truth. They will focus a lot more on the words that you're saying and what you're actually saying versus how you're saying them. This means that you should collapse on a few arguments and weigh, because if you weigh a point, the judge will take note of that and will consider that at the end of the flow when they're deciding who wins the debate. Secondly, you should adapt to your flow judge. You can speak faster than normal because they'll be taking notes on what you're saying, and they'll be open to non-stock arguments because they'll understand the logic better and won't try to make sense of everything you're saying in their head because they'll have notes to write down. This means that you should signpost and weigh because they'll clearly be examining the evidence that you write down, and they'll see the points that you make, and they'll only emphasize the points that you decide to emphasize. This means that you should point out drops. If your opponents forget to say something in summary or final focus, you should point it out so that the flow judge can recognize that, and they'll no longer take that point into account when deciding who won the debate. But this also means that you should be consistent during summary and final focus, because if you drop a point, then the flow judge will see that as well, and you may lose the debate because the flow judge didn't take into consideration a point that would have won you the debate. And the last point is the judge wants to be there because they wish that they had a flow judge when they were debating, so they will sympathize with you, and you shouldn't worry about them being biased. Next, the lay judge. The lay judge will simply vote for the better team. This means that speaking and delivery is a big part of who wins. You must seem like you are winning the debate. This means that you should use ethos arguments, you should dominate in crossfire, and you should stress the big picture. You should focus a lot on how you're speaking materially, and if you're speaking well, and if you're speaking slowly. If the lay judge feels like they understand you, then they'll vote for you to win the debate. On top of that, you should adapt to the lay judge. The lay judge is somewhat opposite to the flow judge, where you must be clear with your argument and you must speak slowly to make sure that they understand that. That means that signposting, weighing, and pointing out dropped points won't necessarily work with the lay judge because they won't stick to a flow like a flow judge would. This means that you should use coherent logic because they won't be taking notes on what you're saying. So you should be speaking slowly and be straightforward so they can understand what you're saying in your head. And the last one, have fun, because a lay judge, a lay judge will be less strict with the kind of points that you can make. But wait, if your judge doesn't speak English, then it's very similar to a lay judge, where you should seem like you're winning the debate. If the judge can understand you, then obviously you must speak confident. You shouldn't stutter. You should make eye contact with the judge and your opponent, and you should act polite and nice. If a person sees that you're debating well, purely of how you're speaking and not what you're saying, it's the same thing as a lay judge, and that's what they'll vote for. The bottom line is you should be consistent. You should find your own style on how you speak when you have a flow judge and how you speak in every lay judge, so that you can adapt to different kinds of debate situations that you're in. However, this doesn't mean that you should switch your style drastically round to round, because constantly moving back and forth will confuse you and your partner, if you have one. And yeah, be consistent, make sure you understand your judge, because in the end, the judge is the one who decides whether or not you won the debate.